Hi everyone, Broomy here. Thanks for joining me. Well, as the title says, today we're going to go through all things AN fittings. Alright, welcome back everyone. If it happens to be your first time on the channel, thanks for joining us. Consider clicking the subscribe button. Don't forget to ring the bell to make sure you receive all notifications, and share this video with your friends on social media if you find it interesting and helpful. Alright, so a bit of background on me before we get started. I have been retailing, wholesaling, making and fitting braided hoses for the best part of almost 20 years now. I used to work for a company that also developed and manufactured all these type of hose and fittings as well. I would know them back to front, and I thought, what better time to actually impart some of my knowledge onto you guys to help you out. So they can be a bit daunting and confusing at times. They all look the same, but they're all very different at the same time. So let's go a bit deeper into braided hose and fittings, and let's try and find the right hose and fitting for your vehicle. AN fittings and hoses are often found installed on high performance race cars and street cars alike. AN hoses are used for all types of liquids such as fuel, oil, hydraulic fluid, brake fluid and many more. AN actually stands for Army Navy, which relates back to World War II, which is a standardised military specification brought about by both Army and Navy to standardise the hose and fittings they were using across the fleet of their vehicles. Just like military and aviation items such as mil-spec connectors, these high performance lines often find their way into motorsport over the years. AN fittings are easily identified by the 37-degree taper, forming a metal-on-metal leak-free seal. Now we know many people with show cars run these fittings because, let's be honest, they look cool. The main benefit, however, is in motorsports, where they offer a serviceable connection with a reliable seal. Because they are a screw-together fitting, you can easily transport fluids through bulkheads and firewalls. Now AN hose ends come in three main types to suit different types of hoses, that being rubber, braided, and PTFE, or commonly known as Teflon. Okay, one of the honorable mentions here goes to crimp fittings. Now I'm not going to mention those in this video because people who are watching this video and learning how to assemble hose and fittings more than likely aren't going to be using a crimp machine. They're quite expensive to enter that, to get the machine and the dies and all that, so you can use that method, but you'll more than likely have to have a professional make those lines for you. Alright, so these three fitting styles here are the most common you'll find, and they're also very easy and basic to assemble with common hand tools. Right, first we have what's commonly referred to as a push lock hose end. Very easy in operation. All you're doing, it's one piece, you're pushing the rubber hose over and it locks in place, and it's as simple as that. So very basic and easy to use. The second fitting is used for braided rubber hose. Now the hose outer cover may be made of stainless steel or even nylon. Again, it's quite basic in its operation. There's only two parts. We've got a socket and a fitting. Push the hose over the socket, assemble it and tighten, and then away you go. Okay, so when working with braided hose, it'll give you much better working pressure than it does with rubber hose. But the third type we've got here is superior to all that. So the Teflon or PTFE hose is a three-part, so it's much more complex in terms of steps to assemble. You've got a socket, nut and olive and the fitting, but this will have much greater working pressure than a normal braided hose. Now all these fittings are available in different sizes as well as bends, and depending on the brand you can also get a various amount of colours as well. Right, so the biggest mistake I've seen over the years of selling hose and fittings is that people wanting to put AN braided hose onto traditional hose barbs. So you cannot do that. Let me just tell you right now, you cannot do that. And the reason is because the ID of the AN hose is much different than ID of normal rubber hose. So if you've got a hose barb that's say 3/8, a rubber hose will have an ID of 3/8, straight on hose clamp, you're right. A -6 AN hose, which might be the equivalent of a 3/8 rubber hose, will not fit over that barb. It's actually slightly smaller than that. So just remember that, keep that in mind when you are buying rubber hoses and braided hoses, that if you're looking to use hoses with existing, say, barbs, that you must use the right hose to suit that. Now in terms of sizing, it's actually quite easy once you get your head around it. The sizes in braided hoses are -3, -4, -6, -8, -10, -12, -16, whatever. So common applications, -3 would be used for brake lines, -4 for something like a turbo oil feed, -6 and -8 normally used for, say, fuel lines, -10 for oil, and -12 for coolant. So stainless steel braided hose offers great resistance to the outside environment. However, it also means that it's going to be more abrasive on your items such as your bodywork. It will easily, if it rubs up against paintwork, it'll rub paintwork off in no time. So you've got to be careful of that when you're installing the hoses to make sure it's away from bodywork or anything else for that matter. It's a rubber core, which is also reinforced, which means it's right to work under the pressures that you do have in your automotive applications. So another type of braided hose is the nylon type. So this is basically a stainless steel braided hose with a nylon cover on the outside. So it's still the rubber inner with a stainless mesh, but it's got a nylon cover on the outside. Now, these are great. They feel a little bit lighter. However, they can also attract elements from the atmosphere around them. So if you've got this line running under your car, expect it to get dirt and grime and road mess and that all in it, soaked in it, and it's really going to turn the hose looking pretty ratty in no time. Oil contaminants, if you've got it in an engine bay sitting next to an oil breather, for instance, and oil vapors coming out, it'll absorb all that and become quite oily and grimy. So just be conscious of that with your nylon hose. Right, so the Teflon hose, unlike your rubber hose, is very basic in design. It's a stainless steel outer braid and an extruded PTFE Teflon inner liner, and that's it. It's as simple as that. Now, these hoses are extremely light because of that, because they don't have a big rubber core through them. However, one of the detractors is they're not very flexible. So you've got to be careful of bend radius and things, because you can bend it too tight. And as you can see there, you can actually crimp this fitting. So you've got to be careful of bend radius and things like that when using Teflon. And one of the biggest benefits of Teflon is that it is essentially inert to all materials. So you could run brake fluid, methanol, alcohol-based fuels, hydraulic oil, whatever you want through this, and it's not going to react. So unlike some of the rubber hoses or braided rubber where you're not sure if it's rated to alcohol fuels or brake fluids or hydraulic oil or whatever, if you're ever in doubt, Teflon will always do the job. So the last style of hose that everyone's probably aware of and seen before is just a standard rubber, which is a rubber hose with a braided mesh inner for extra strength. Now, just be aware if you're upgrading your old carbureted system to an EFI that many carbureted hoses don't actually have the inner braid mesh for strength. So they're only rated to very, very low PSI ratings. So if you were to use that in a hydraulic application or EFI application, they're very, very common to balloon and then burst, which is really, really dangerous. So just be careful if you're upgrading to lines, or you're going to use rubber line that you just found that you're not aware of the history of the line. You can check to see on the inside if it has the braided reinforced mesh, but also often hoses will have pressure ratings on them like this one does here. But yeah, if you are upgrading from hose you've found around to putting on your car, just be careful that it is the right rubber hose for the right application. So you'll probably see many fittings companies also sell wrenches. Now, this isn't just because they want to upsell and make more money on every single sale. It's because they know you've bought this and invested in these fittings that you want them to keep them looking as good as they can be. So it's soft aluminium anodized as well. For soft aluminium anodized, they are a perfect fit too. And yeah, they'll work flawlessly. They won't mar up your nice, beautiful, cool looking fittings. And you'll be able to get them on the car super tight without having rounded off edges or looking ratty. Okay, so while all three methods will require very different assembly techniques, the first is to make a cut. One method is by using a 1mm cutting disc, which I'll demonstrate now. Okay, so you can see here it makes quite a clean cut. But if you can't see here, a bit of smoke's coming out of there. It's because the material has been cut or melted away, which means some of that can go into the hose, so you must clean the hose out thoroughly. Also, if using nylon, it will lead to some of the material on the outside debrading. Now, a second method for cutting hose, which is the one I prefer, is using electrical cable cutters, and it's quite simply as easy as this. Now you can see there, super clean cut, very easy. Also, no cutting in terms of melting material, so the hose stays extremely clean. The only thing detractor here is that the hose can slightly oval over when it's cut, because it is clamping it essentially. So just a case of conforming it back to shape and you're done. Now, there's plenty of different methods to cut that braided hose, as well as using a hacksaw or using a really sharp chisel and hitting with a hammer, but one of these two methods are the ones I like. When cutting rubber hose, well, quite simply, I just use some of these hose cutters, and it's just a case of easy as that. So we've got our 3 hose end styles here. Let's learn how to install hose onto all 3 of these. We'll start with the normal braided hose one first. Start by unscrewing the fitting Once you've got the socket out, you want to install the hose this way. So we'll just put that into our vice jaws. Right, so with the socket in your vice jaws, you get your hose, and it's simply a case of trying to tuck in the braid or the nylon inside the socket so it doesn't fray, and then with a twisting and pushing motion, push all the way in until the hose bottoms out onto the threads. Okay, so you can see here, you've got the threads of the socket, and where the threads stop, the hose starts. That's perfect, we're ready to assemble. All right, next step is just to lubricate the threads a little bit. Right, so what you want to do here is just seat this barb in the hose and slowly start the thread by hand to ensure you've got proper alignment and engagement, and to also prevent any cross threading. Once you can no longer do the fitting up by hand, it's time to grab your tools and finish the job. Tighten the hose until you're left with either no gap or about 1 millimeter gap. And that's it. This is a hose I actually just made for our project F350. You can see that over on full boost. Okay, so unlike the other hoses, the Teflon is a 3-part. So our first move is to actually grab the socket, feed it over the hose like so, and just leave it on and forget about that. We'll worry about that later. Next step is we have to fit this olive flush over the Teflon. But not only over the Teflon, it has to fit between the braid and the Teflon. So easiest thing to do is get a flathead screwdriver, or even something that's plastic that's not marking, because you have to be very careful not to damage this Teflon liner. And you just need to push this braid and separate it away from the Teflon so you can get that olive in there properly. As you can see, this is quite fiddly. I recommend using gloves while you're doing it too, because these stainless bits here are ultra sharp and they will stick in your finger and they will cut you. Right, so once you think you've got this pushed back far enough, you can get the olive and seat it on. Now there's 2 ways of doing this: trying to put it on here and bumping it up against there, or you can use a tool like this, which is an olive installation tool that can do the job for you too. Right, so I like to keep the Teflon somewhat secured in the vise, because this Teflon liner can actually move inside the sleeve. So once this is back, we're just going to get the olive, just start over there. I'll get an installation tool, just cram it on home. Yeah, what you'll end up seeing is that the Teflon is right hard up against the bottom of this olive, and then it's time to install the fitting back inside. So again, I'm just going to lightly clamp it in here so the Teflon liner can't move inside. You don't want to clamp it too hard, because like I said before, it can deform. We'll just push this in here. Sometimes it'll go one ridge, because there are ridges inside this olive, so once it starts on one, you know you're pretty good to get to the second one. Ugh. And with a bit of grunt, that's now on there. Right, so just like it was with the braided hose, although it's the reverse, you can do the reverse with the braided hose as well. It works both ways, but it's a case now of just putting the socket end over and tightening it up. Right, so when complete, you'll end up with an example like this. Again, another fitting for our F350 project car you can see over on full boost. Right, so the last type of hose is this rubber hose, and really this is pretty basic. It's just a case of pushing on and all the way through. Now, you can see that it went on really easily. The reason is I didn't lubricate the stem of the hose barb, because that will promote it to hose to slide back off. All I did is put this hose in a little bit of hot water, not boiling water, just hot water for about 10 or 15 seconds, softens the rubber up a bit, and it'll easily enable you to slide it on there. So, job done. So there's a lot of other automotive hoses out there, such as silicone hose, which is used in air intakes and turbo intercooler piping, or even this PVC reinforced hose, which is often used on crankcase breather system, so you can easily, clearly identify if you are having an engine crankcase breathing problem. But in terms of AN hoses, that's easy. That's how simple it is to make your own hoses at home. Buy the components from wherever you need, the hose, the fittings to suit your style and your needs, whatever you need, and get assembling. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell to receive all notifications, and don't forget to share it along all your social medias so your friends can see it too. And until next time, I'll see you later.